Our first presenter today is Jen Looper. She's the head of academic advocacy at AWS with over 23 years of experience as a web and mobile developer, specializing in creating cross-platform mobile and web applications. And Jen has written two books, both published by Wiley. One is Computer Science for Kids, which is a textbook aligned to CSTA standards for grades 6 through 8. And her upcoming book is called The Illustrated AWS Cloud. We're extremely excited to have her here with us today. So everyone, please welcome Jen Looper.
Hi, everybody. So grateful to be here. I feel like I've seen the birth of this conference many, many years ago, and it's wonderful to see everyone coming back online, coming back in person to do conferences. What a pleasure it is for me. So very grateful to be here. Thanks so much for the intro. As Sean mentioned, my name is Jen Looper. I'm the head of academic advocacy at AWS. We always wear our bedazzled shirts. I'm actually the one who designed this and got it past branding. So that was a great success in my career, Borat style, great success. And I have to say that you think your legacy is going to be writing textbooks, doing amazing demos. My legacy is this. This is the bedazzled moment that we're all waiting for. So excited to be here. Today, I want to talk about an important topic that actually a lot of folks are talking about. It's thinking about this moment that we're living through in terms of how we are using and how we are being influenced by and how people are talking about generative AI. And I want to talk about the ethics of this thing, because as my colleague said, this is not only being done for us, but it potentially is being done to us. So let's think about how we can create a framework where we can talk about really the ethics of generative AI. And I want to center it around human beings, around the humans who are actually in the business of creating this thing. And I do say business with intention. But I'm a humanistic this is my training. I came through the humanities. I got my solid liberal arts degree. And just to give you a little bit more context, like we said, I'm the head of academic advocacy at AWS. That means that I'm dealing with students. I'm dealing with educators and students and folks who are interested in upskilling themselves and learning, if they so choose, about the cloud. I like to think about it as, we should be able to help you build the future that you want. I'm not in the business of, forcing you to align to some kind of paradigm. I would like you to tell me what you're interested in learning, and I'll find ways to teach it to you so that it sticks. So along those lines, like Sean mentioned, I wrote the Computer Science for Kids textbook. It has a website that goes with it. That came out earlier this year, and then we're just launching the Illustrated AWS Cloud. This is I wanted to create it as a coloring book, actually, so I worked with a wonderful illustrator, Denise Yu, who I think is in Toronto, actually. And you can go and as you're learning about cloud concepts and becoming a cloud practitioner, you can go ahead and color in the pictures. So I always like to do things in a very visual fashion, very, very engaging for folks who are visual learners like myself. In terms of education, a little bit off the beaten path. My PhD is in French, specifically 13th century French, which we would call Old French. Very, very useful. Use it every day. In point of fact, it's quite difficult to find a job in these sort of fields. So I retrained in about the year 2000. But it was a great ride, and I went to Wellesley and Cal Berkeley and had a blast for a while until I retrained, and then I had other kinds of blasts. I've been doing web and mobile apps and demos and software engineering and management for 23 years now. I'm the mom of two grown-up daughters. And like I said, I'm a humanist. I'm interested in making people confident that their humanness and their culture and their experiences are reflected in some of these tools that we're creating for them. So this is something I want to talk about. And I also need to mention about this image. So full disclosure, this image was generated with, I like to say a little help, but actually a lot of help with AI. And I was just texted by my daughter last night, who found me on LinkedIn because I switched all my images. And she said, "Mommy," she's a grown up, but she said, "Mama, it's not you. What did you do? Is this from AI?" It's like, yes, it's done with AI. And I had to crop it because the hands were like AI hands and like 6 fingers is all crazy looking. But I thought it was an interesting experiment. And honestly, at this age, I'm having trouble getting decent headshots. And I figured, hey, let's just try AI. What could go wrong, right? But my child is like, I don't want that picture. I want my real mom back. But here we are. Anyway, my husband was not thrilled either, but I think it's kind of fun. So let's jump on in to, whoops, let me just do this way. Okay, to our agenda. So our agenda today is in 6 pieces. I want to talk about the road that we've taken to get where we are now in terms of generative AI. And because I deal with students, I want to talk about what this really means in an educational context. And before you check out, I just want to remember that all of us are going to deal with the ramifications as new workers come into our workforce and we manage them. So when we deal with, the next generation coming in, we're going to have to understand the moment that they have lived while they're preparing to be the future engineers of the world. I also want to talk about some of the major issues. And when I say issues, I mean challenges and problems around the introduction of generative AI into pretty much everything we're doing at this point, from creating headshots to polishing emails to, God forbid, writing essays. And I want to talk about some of the AI ethics frameworks that are cropping up. A lot of companies, a lot of folks are looking to create some kind of framework, some kind of list of things that we should be watching for when we introduce and when we build generative AI. I want to then introduce a different perspective that's coming from my background, from the liberal arts. I want to talk a little bit about moral philosophy and what we can use from that tradition to influence the way we think about these topics. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about history, what history has taught us, and offer a little bit of hope. So this is not all the doom and gloom talk. In fact, I don't think there's too much doom and gloom. I think there's just a lot of material to think about. So let's think deeply. I'm going to be watching the chat as well. There's a moment in this talk that I would love to interact with you. So please go ahead and type your questions in the chat and I will watch. Okay, how on earth did we get here? We are definitely not in Kansas anymore. I grew up in Missouri with all these tornadoes, and this was one of these films that marked my youth, but we are definitely not in Kansas anymore. And this is an interesting movie, actually, because if you remember, it started out in black and white, and then when she gets to Oz, when Dorothy gets to Oz, it turns into Technicolor. So this is that Technicolor moment where we're all like, holy guacamole, what is happening? What is happening? So let's talk about it. So let's start our journey down the yellow brick road. And also, by the way, I put the dates of these movies in the little circle here, so you can remember when these things were. Like, what an incredible amount of cinematography we've gotten through in the last 100 years. Okay, let's start our journey down that yellow brick road and give a definition of generative AI. What is generative AI? I'm just going to be boring and read this slide and then give it a little bit of context. Generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that can create novel, and I use that word very specifically, novel, not new, novel content and ideas, including conversations, stories, images, videos, headshots, and music. And like all artificial intelligence, generative AI is powered by machine learning models, right? Very, very, very large models that are pre-trained on vast amounts of data and are commonly referred to as foundation models, FMs. So we can contextualize this statement by saying, really, it's not that new. It's not that new. And humans have really been experimenting with quantifying language for a long time. And decades ago, we started to look at the relationships between words in a statistical way. And these are called word embeddings. And these are statistical relationships between words. So these are numbers that we associate with words that map where they live in a multi-dimensional space in relationship to other words. I keep jumping slides, so I'm going to go like this. So let's take the example of the words dog and cat. So these two words may statistically be a little bit closer together in this multi-dimensional space than, for example, bus and car. Those are somewhere else. And we're making these connections between words in this word embedding space. And to help us do that, we have this family of algorithms to help us achieve that. And this family of algorithms is called Word2Vec, and they actually have been around for really quite a long time. They're used to take many documents together and tokenize them into individual words, and then figuring out the relationship between these words and build these language models. It's statistically more likely that dog and cat will be together than bus and cat, those are somewhere else. So, and these algorithms all feed into these many useful things provided to us by the field called natural language processing, NLP. So using NLP, you can do really cool things. You can summarize blog posts into just one paragraph. You can take a paragraph and blow it up into a blog post. You can create a Q&A bot, that can answer questions, ChatGPT style. You can analyze the sentiment of a database of hotels, for example, to see which has the best reviews, so that you can be a little bit more educated on what hotel you want to choose. And you can create tools that will help you analyze speech and written words so that something like Alexa could understand you. Alexa just picked up. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Yeah, thanks, Alexa. And then you could do something like creating an itinerary for top things to do in Los Angeles or Boston, where I'm located, or Toronto, which is a great place. Okay, so just to give you a little more context and a little more history, in 2017, there was this huge leap forward in this field when this paper came out from Toronto called Attention is All You Need. And this paper introduced the concept of transformers. So the transformer architecture built models based on attention, which is a mechanism that enables the model to learn context from the preceding words and parameters. And the concept of attention enabled models to scale the understanding of relationships between words efficiently using parallel computing. So we have this convergence of a really interesting algorithm, an interesting way of building models, corresponding to the ability for us to use parallel computing and to use all this GPU that we suddenly have available. So it's really, a convergence of firepower. And this revolutionized generative AI and really opened the door to just much more accurately predicted text. And of course, to be this accurate, these models have to be trained on really a lot of data. The Bloom model has 176 billion with a B parameters, and they're just getting bigger, right? So we call them LLMs, or large language models. I feel like, yeah, there we go. Okay. However, LLMs have this habit of hallucinating. I wonder if you've heard this term, that these models are hallucinating, or if you've experienced it using something like ChatGPT. So here I pushed ChatGPT to try to work on my French verb conjugations. I'm a French teacher by training, so hey, maybe this thing can help. So I asked it to create the present tense conjugation of the French verb historialiser. It's not a word. And okay, it figured out, yep, that's not a word. But I asked it then to create the present tense conjugation of chuchoter, spelled with 2 T's, so to whisper. And it went right on ahead and gave me a beautiful conjugation, which is actually wrong because the infinitive is misspelled. There are not 2 T's. But if I was a French, actually, interestingly, they do the je tue une île with 2 T's, and then they move to nous chuchotons with 1 T, and then they go back. It's a complete hallucination. This is not a thing. This is not correct. And but it's so convinced of itself. The way this thing was built is just, it's very polite. It just wants to help. It'll tell you anything you want to know, right? So fun. Until you're trying to pass a test in French conjugation. So anyway, I just double checked because I was starting to hallucinate and try to remember these things. And I just asked it, is chuchoter with 2 T's the proper spelling? And yes, it's the proper spelling. It means to whisper. And, I asked it, isn't it spelled chuchoter? It's like, oh, yes, actually, in point of fact, it is spelled chuchoter, je chuchote, elle chuchote. So it appreciates my patience, and that's awesome. But, I really needed to know, right? If I was a student, I would be up a creek without a paddle, as we say. So this thing both double downs and it has no backbone at all. So why do LLMs hallucinate? Well, the reason is their probability-based creation. They are based on using probability. They're fed huge quantities of public text, and their output is only as accurate as their input. And we'll come back to that. And the quote is that hallucination was shown to be a statistical inevitable byproduct of any imperfect generative model that is trained to maximize training likelihood. And the problem with something like ChatGPT is they're built to be polite and helpful and seem so credible, no matter what, no matter how much you disagree. And they are believable and they double down. And it's a really interesting moment where somebody needs to write a dissertation on the rhetoric of building chatbots, because wow, that would be really interesting. Here we go back to useless PhDs that nobody will read. But anyway, awesome. However, if you fast forward to 2023 in the fall, now we have over 7,000, and this screenshot was taken a little while ago. I'm sure there are more apps. It's exponentially growing. That's covering all kinds of use cases. There's no end in sight. There's this website called There's an AI for that, because there probably is, and for better or for worse, using these tools is especially prevalent in educational contexts. So I want to talk about this. Let's talk about this. Okay. So here we are with Charlie Chaplin. I recently actually watched the kid watch this movie. It's astounding. And fun fact, the little kid who plays the kid had a huge, long career and became Uncle Fester in the Addams Family TV series. Isn't that wild? Who knew? So great moment for him. Anyway, let's talk about what this proliferation of AI tools means for education. So arguably, this explosion of AI helpers has disrupted education more than any other sector. I will die on this hill. I think it's completely disrupted education. Unfortunately, schools and administrations and faculty cannot move as fast as this field is moving. So we're in this really wild, precipitous careening course towards using tools that schools are not equipped to handle yet. And it's kind of unfortunate, because after COVID, right, teachers are coming back into the classroom, and literally, as we would say, they're stepping out of the frying pan into the fire, right? After COVID, they just find themselves emerging from one crisis into this next one. Like I said, the education sector does not pivot as quickly as other sectors. And why should you care? Because this impacts things like developer education. This impacts training and skilling. K-12 education is going to be, flowing right on through the systems and up into the workforce, as it's supposed to do. It also impacts adult education, college education, which is my particular sector. And it really is going to be impacting all the ways in which we build a relationship with people who want to learn from us. Folks like all of the folks who are publishing these incredible courses on Coursera, on all these other elements, they're going to have to figure out how to incorporate generative AI. Khan Academy is doing some interesting things, somewhat successful within the K-12 sphere. They have, what did he call it? Conmigo, wonderful name for a chatbot, but it's embedded into Khan Academy, and the little kids can say, hey, I don't understand this problem. Can you explain it to me? And then they have to deal with the hallucinations, right? So it's a very, very interesting moment for education plus generative AI. And again, why should you care? You're not in K-12 anymore, because as an engineer, you're also a learner. As you go through the ranks in your career, you're going to become a teacher. I'm going to start managing folks who have gone through the education system, Gen Z and whatever is next, I don't know the acronym, and they've all been using these tools. So we're going to have to figure out how to engage with them, how to assess them. Assessment is really, really challenging in this moment. And then everyone's going to be onboarding new employees who have grown up both during COVID and the AI revolution. So are you excited? I'm excited. It's going to be interesting. Okay, here's a wonderful image of the future Uncle Fester and Charlie. So in this post-ChatGPT world, right, educational institutions and teachers and faculty and employers are all going to have to pay close attention to the care and feeding of the student experience as they navigate AI tooling. So this is the moment that we're in, and we're going to have to be very, very aware of what's going on. So I thought I'd give you some stats. 89% of students have admitted to using ChatGPT. Depends on whom you ask. I have this feeling that it's more prevalent in the US than in some places in Europe. I know for a fact it's quite prevalent in India, in APAC. But long story short, students are using these tools wholesale with little guidance. Faculty are countering with unenforceable policy and ineffective tooling. I have a friend who is teaching in the business school at UMass. She's relying on Turnitin and GPT-0. And I'm telling you right now, those things don't work. So it's almost indistinguishable. And some students actually are not super comfortable with these tools. Those who don't use these helpers actually consider that the folks who are using them, they're at the advantage. So the students who don't use them feel like they're at a disadvantage, and some of them feel it's very unjust. A potential future, perhaps, is a world where we do less writing and more oral presentations. That could be a moment that we would live. I can see that. My husband actually at MIT right now is not teaching his field, which is physics. He's teaching speaking. He's teaching students how to give oral presentations. Very, very interesting to watch how it's working. So let's talk about 3 major issues. I was just in Martha's Vineyard. I'm in Boston, so it's on Martha's Vineyard, and you walk past the Jaws Bridge, which you're not supposed to jump off anymore, but people do anyway. My kids jumped off the Jaws Bridge. Anyway, we're going to need a bigger boat. I thought that I would give you this accurate representation of a data scientist training an LLM. You just keep feeding it, keep feeding it, keep feeding it. And oh my gosh, it's huge. It's huge. Look at that thing. Oh my Lord. Anyway, so some folks have been whistleblowing and raising red flags. Some researchers warn, that we're approaching artificial general intelligence, or some people are excited that we might be approaching artificial general intelligence or AGI. Folks from OpenAI who are building ChatGPT have said that artificial general intelligence is an existential threat to humanity, which makes me wonder personally why they've based their business plan on it, but here we are. A big problem is that by making these interfaces that are so credible in acting human, this is what worries me the most, that human beings are going to lose their confidence in their innate humanity, in their innate humanness, and turn to AI first to help them generate those ideas. It always bugs me to death when people say, it's going to help you with your creativity. I have no problem with creativity. I paint every day. I just learned piano. I'm a violinist. I play early music. You guys, have confidence in your own human creativity. This is like, this shouldn't be even a question. If you read Twyla Tharp's book, she's a famous choreographer. She talks about the creative impulse. It is a muscle memory. Keep practicing, and you will have a creative moment every day. And you do not need an AI to be creative for you. I'm telling you right now. So going forward, I just want to also first call out Dr. Timnit Gebru, who is one of the foremost folks who are talking about some of these problems. Whenever she says anything, listen carefully, because she has a lot of great insights. But I just want to focus on 3 basic aspects of building and using a generative AI model. I want to focus on how you train it, the data that you feed it, and how you're using that model. So let's go. So here's that chart that I'd love you to take a look at. Let's talk about training an LLM. I'm actually a sustainability ambassador at Amazon, and I have a lot of passion about these topics, how we can work in these mega companies and somehow, think about the environmental impact of what we're doing. But there's a lot of energy needed to train an LLM. Not just energy in terms of natural resources that are consumed, but also human resources, right? So there's this concept of detoxing the model. And that I believe it's Time Magazine did a really interesting article about how workers in Kenya are being paid not a lot of money to detox these models, and it caused a lot of anxiety and trauma for these workers, because they're looking at horrible things. They're looking at stuff coming out of the public internet, and they're removing it from the model, but they have to see it, right? So detoxing has to do with training these models and scraping, because they're scraping enormous amounts of data from the public internet. Humans have to be hired to detox it. And companies outsource this cleaning task to some low-paid workers overseas, and those workers are suffering mental consequences. So this is something we should be aware. These things are not just magically created, there are humans behind it. There's also an issue about energy, and I'm actually quite interested in this as well. Hugging Face researchers did a really interesting calculation of the carbon used in training the Bloom model. They used a software tool called Code Carbon, and it tracked the carbon dioxide emissions Bloom was producing in real time over a period of 18 days during its training. And Hugging Face estimated that Bloom's training led to 25 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. Now, 25 metric tons is 60 New York to London flights, 60 New York to London flights to train this thing. It's done on a supercomputer that does use nuclear power, apparently. So it's a bit, more of a green energy. Hugging Face, I believe they're based in Europe, so they have options for training on cleaner energy. But this is something I really think we need to think about. These models are just getting bigger, 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 bigger. They have to train, and that uses a lot of energy and human resources. By way of comparison, OpenAI's ChatGPT, GPT-3 and Meta's OPT were estimated to emit more than 500 for GPT-3 and 75 metric tons of carbon dioxide during training. So if Bloom is 25 metric tons, and that's 60 New York to London flights, 500. Let's think about that for a second. Now, before I dive into a morass of negativity, just to mention that we should counter this data with a thought maybe generative AI can help us save energy in the longer run by performing tasks such as optimizing flight paths, finding ways to make planes lighter. I don't know what engineering can be, I don't know much about aviation, but maybe there are things that we can do, and maybe some of these AIs can help us find those things. So maybe it could be offset a little bit, but I just keep in mind, every time you bang open ChatGPT, you're flying to London. Anyway, something to think about. Let's talk about the data. So we talk about garbage in and garbage out, right? We talk about scraping all of this data from the public internet and training on it. But what garbage are we talking about? So there are a lot of questions concerning the ways these LLMs are trained. And this is particularly interesting as well to me because we're talking about the question of copyright. So legal scholars are wrestling with, who owns the novel generated data? And a lot of times we don't know whether the data used in training was copyright, or if you can copyright generated data because you can't reproduce it. Can you copyright it? How can you cite it in an academic paper? How can you check its accuracy? Because it seems like to check accuracy, it needs to be reproducible, and a lot of it's not reproducible. A lot of these, texts are not reproducible. What happens to the whole concept of verifiable primary sources? I don't think this thing is a primary source. I think it's like a tertiary source, right? So, so all you students, let's please not cite ChatGPT. There's also a question of the diversity of data, also very interesting to me. I love museums. I love ancient texts. I love 13th century prose romance. That was my bag back in the 90s. But these models are only ingesting data that's been digitized and is public. So that leaves out ancient artifacts like these. Have you ever seen these wax cylinders? It's so interesting. Before vinyl records were invented, they had wax cylinders for recording audio. There's a place in Massachusetts that's figured out how to digitize them, which is awesome because they're super fragile. So many interesting concepts, really old artifacts, really fragile and ancient artifacts. I just saw a news story actually though about some AI that was helping people decipher some of the carbonized scrolls from Herculaneum. Herculaneum was buried under hot ash, and lots of scrolls in their library were carbonized, and they figured out how to use some AI. So that's a great use of AI, to digitize ancient texts. But there's a lot of texts that are left out, right? They're only ingesting public digitized data. So sometimes the output of the model is weird. Like I asked it to write me a blog post in Old French. I wanted to see if it would generate, Old French linguistically. And oh my gosh, what a mess. What a mess this is. Nous explorons les délices de l'Old French. I mean, let's just stop right there. But anyway, so this lack of data is going to be leading to incomplete, incorrect data, and it also can lead to bias in models. So this is something we need to be aware of. To counter that, I tested ChatGPT on the Cherokee language. Did pretty well, actually, because I wanted to see, something relatively esoteric, how that would work. Okay, moving on. There's also the problem of privacy and safety. So many platforms are not intended for use by children, but there are certainly there's nothing catching, I think in Italy, they had a big problem with that, and they blocked ChatGPT for a little while until there was some assurances that we're protecting children. But I actually tested it. I tried to upload an email roster, and it wouldn't let me. Good answer. But I feel like it's because of whistleblowers who are saying, we need to stop allowing people to upload crazy things. So I'm going to decline that right now. Okay, so let me continue. Sorry, I was just summoned to a meeting I thought was later. Okay, here we go. Number 4, AI ethics frameworks. We know there are a lot of considerations pertaining to, the fair use and building of AI systems, and probably there are some organizations building frameworks, right? Probably. So let's do a little roundup the usual suspects. So there are a lot of gin joints right now in town, as Bogey would tell us, and they're all building their own ethics frameworks. As it turns out, and they tend to focus on several aspects we've already identified as a major issue in building and using AI, but you're going to love this slide. So this is, I don't know if it's scrolling for you, but it looks like it's blank. Do I go like this? There we go. So these are the list of gin joints right now. They're all building their own ethics frameworks. I found about 17 of them. There's just, every company seems to have their own ethics framework. This is bad. This is a bad thing. We need much more public oversight, but I'm not sure that we're going to get that public oversight in anytime soon. But let me just mention that if you crunch all of these frameworks down to what we would call brass tacks, you have 10 general elements that are cited. There's transparency about how AI algorithms work, how they make decisions, and the data they use. Fairness, so avoiding discriminatory or biased outcomes. Accountability, which is taking responsibility for AI's decisions. Human oversight, ensuring that humans can intervene. For example, if I try to upload my roster, right? Benefits to humanity. AI should benefit humans. That would be nice. Privacy, so no drone robot war scenarios, please. Privacy, we need to protect individuals' privacy. We need to allow them to be forgotten, especially in Europe where that's important. Robustness and safety. We need to stop models from doing harm and make sure they're secure. We need to make sure they're inclusive, ensuring that they don't exacerbate inequality, ensure collaboration amongst stakeholders in different industries. So the healthcare folks should be talking to the legal folks who should be talking to the environmental folks, right? And then long-term considerations, managing risks and benefits over time. So these are sort of the 10 basic elements that folks generally center on. I'd like to suggest that we can actually even think about this in a simpler fashion. I love this quote: "Nothing has caused the human race so much trouble as intelligence," from Rear Window, great film, 1954. Let's think about how we might be losing sight of the forest for all of those 10 trees, right? Let's talk about ethics as a large topic, right? Let's talk about the field of ethics or moral philosophy. Sometimes those words are used interchangeably. What does it do? It involves systematizing and defending and recommending concepts of right or wrong behavior. And I just want to put a little parenthesis here that ethics are not relative. I like to think of it as morals are relative. So you can think about in some parts of the world, some things are acceptable, in other parts they're not. Those are morals. Ethics should be more high level. Ethics should be like an umbrella that in general, worldwide, we don't do X and we do Y, right? So let's dive into this meta universe of ethics. And I want to lean on some time-tested ethical frameworks couched in a vocabulary of moral philosophy. So if you start digging into ethics, you can talk about meta-ethics, normative ethics, and applied ethics. So we can lean on an understanding of meta-ethics, which is these abstract questions that you can take place before the data ever starts to be scraped, right? What are the questions we should be asking around these topics? What are the basic issues that we need to think about before we start? Are our goals right or wrong? Will our actions potentially cause harm? Should we take steps to mitigate it? And then you can lean on normative ethics to create standards over the right or wrong nature of what we choose to do, right? And then finally, you can take steps using applied ethics. And these will give you those practical determinations on how to mitigate the potential harm of your actions. There's this 3-step process that you can lean on these time-tested, frameworks and think about what you're going to be doing before you start building. So let's ask some questions. Let's just think about the meta-ethics of generative AI. Let's ask some questions. Should we be allowed to use copyright material to train our models? Should we be allowed to train them using confidential healthcare data? Should we be allowed to scrape student or underage users' PII, personally identifiable information? So I'm going to be watching the chat, and you can start typing in if you'd like. here's a use case. You want to build a model to suggest the best locations for a large-scale electrical grid project. What meta-ethical questions should you ask? I'll give you two in case folks in the chat are thinking deeply. The two I thought of were, how will we take into account native land claims? How will local water sources be impacted? So those are something to think about. Let's turn our attention to normative ethics. This is where you set up those test cases that will allow you to set some standards, right? So we have a bot. It's been set up to distribute information about mental health services. Should it be required to disclose its sources and the fact that it's a bot? You know, we have an art generating bot. It's creating novel art based on images scraped from Dribble. Should the company who created be required to pay royalties to the artist? So what are some normative ethical test cases that we can set to ensure our electrical grid design does no harm? So in a normative test case, I would say, well, if we respect native land claims as a core value based on what we decided prior, can we block the training from ingesting those latitudes and longitudes? If we're respecting water rights, can we take that into account and set limits on water usage? If we're building with ecology in mind, can we check for protected species in the data, you know, and watch for these things? So these are normative ethics. So these are your test cases. And then the last thing is to look at applied ethics. Let's determine practical applications of the standards we just set, right? Your practical application of decisions you've already made. If you're chatting to a bot, it has to disclose that it's a bot, right? My headshot, I decided to disclose that that thing was 17 pictures of me mashed up into some unrecognizable mom picture, right? AI coding helpers should list the software licenses of the code they're trained on. Sorry for the typo. Code Whisperer, which is Amazon's coding helper, does disclose the license. Very useful in a teaching moment. Bots can be built with preventative measures against toxic or biased output. And maybe they should disclose how much carbon was created in their training. That would be a really interesting practical application of a standard that we set. So applied ethics that we can set as standard for our new electrical grid model design, you know, it can reveal lists of harms. It can stack rank locations where the grid could be located to mitigate impact. That would be an excellent sort of a practical way that harms have been mitigated. So we're at the end of this talk, but I want to, I hope that it's been, you know, inspiring, maybe has caused you to think a little bit, to lean into your liberal arts education a little bit more than what we're used to doing as engineers. And I want to give a warning and some hope. This is my very favorite movie, À bout de souffle, Breathless. Don't watch the stupid remake, watch the original. Jean Seberg is just shrugging her shoulders, but we don't have to shrug our shoulders. We can just mention that we have officially entered a second industrial revolution. I brought some amazing pictures from Boston. I'm pretty sure these kids are working in the Lowell mills. Rapid industrialization has environmental and social repercussions that can last for generations. I really hope they found this kid's shoes because it's really concerning. The molasses flood in the North End. People say that when it rains, you can still smell molasses in the North End. It was like a lot of people were killed. 2 million gallons of molasses spilled into the North End. What can you imagine the cleanup? This is some of the ramifications of Boston's industrial revolution. The Lowell Mill girls were a bunch of lots of Irish girls who came over and actually improved their lives by working in the mills. It was a very interesting social ramifications. So some of that. So not all good, not all bad. There's always trade-offs. Another favorite film, La Reine Margot. It's so violent. Oh my gosh. But some people are saying, yay, generative AI, it's just like the printing press, right? Well, do you know what happened when the printing press was? You can draw a direct line from the invention of the printing press to the expansion of literacy, which is a good thing. Protestant Reformation, arguably a good thing. Wars of religion, a terrible thing, right? So there's always trade-offs, always ramifications. And as the legend goes, Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg on October 31st, 1517, and broadsheet copies of that document were printed in London as quickly as 17 days later. So you can see the fast spreading of information from the invention of the printing press, and that really accelerated the change, rapid social change. And it was rough. It was rough. The wars of religion were really not a picnic. So let's not go there. Let's not go to the wars of religion. Let's do something different. Let's try to turn this generative AI moment into a new arts and crafts era. And I'm not talking about, folding paper or coloring, which actually I quite enjoy doing. But during the Industrial Revolution, the first one, a lot of artists and artisans were very concerned that craftsmanship and artisanship were being shunted aside and everything was being mass produced. And there was a sort of revolt during the Great Exposition of 1851, which I believe was the Crystal Palace was there. And the quote was, "The architect, the upholsterer, the paper stainer, the weaver, the calico printer, and the potter produced novelty without beauty, or beauty without intelligence." Isn't that interesting? That's 1851. How can we apply that warning to what we're doing today? Novelty without beauty, beauty without intelligence. There's a kind of an interesting convergence. So I would make a call for craftsmanship. Let's embrace artisanship. Let's embrace what's human. Embrace the arts, the decorative arts. Reclaim what makes us human. We are creative people. Take up your paintbrush, take up your potter's wheel, and create even beautifully crafted code bases. And I just challenge you to determine how you're going to meet this new era head on. If you're interested in painting, we could probably form a painting club because I'm all about watercolor and gouache right now. So that's your challenge. If you want to reach out to me and join my crafty people painting club full of weird crocheting and knitting and painting people and musicians and artists, please join by contacting me on jenlooper.com. You can always visit what we're doing at AWS with students on s12d.com/students. I'm on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it these days at Jen Looper. You can always reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And please feel free to talk to me about anything you've learned today. Lean into your humanity. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. That was amazing. You gave me so many things to think about, and I just feel like I've never gone that deep on generative AI, and really, really interesting. So lots to contemplate. Now we have just a couple minutes to squeeze a few questions, and we have some waiting for us. So let's dive right in. Okay, one is, what's the right roadmap for learning AI?
Oh, that's a really good question. There are a couple curricula that I was involved in at Microsoft when I was at Microsoft. And if you go to GitHub, I could point you there. It was written before this explosion of generative AI. So that's kind of like what we call GoFi, good old-fashioned AI. That's a really excellent curriculum. But for learning about generative AI, you can take a look at community.aws, and there are some terrific articles that we've been writing in developer relations, because we're all leaning into this and we're all actively learning right now. So look for articles by Brooke Jameson on community.aws, or just search the generative AI space there. I think that's probably a best bet for finding a lot of great blog posts.
Love that. All right, great. Next one is, let's see, was it AI that disrupted education, or was it more the internet itself? I've learned, this person says, I've learned so much with YouTube that I would never really go into a classroom to learn. How can schools use these tools we have today to help folks on their learning path?
Yeah, I mean, schools have been disrupted over and over again. The calculator is one of them. I grew up in the calculator era, and I have to say my mental math is completely destroyed. I need that thing. So there's been waves of disruption. I think that the risk is really the K-12 sphere. So you're approaching from maybe more of an adult learner aspect. It's the K-12 kids that have a lot of us scared, because they're learning to use these tools to generate without comprehending what they're generating, or without, being trained in critical thinking skills, so that by the time they get to higher ed, you've had the opportunity to develop your critical thinking skills and then, use the tools. They haven't. So that's what I think is concerning a lot of us. I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, education as a whole has been massively disrupted many, many times. It still needs some disruption. I think there's a lot of improvements that we can make. It used to be schools were designed to fill the factories with compliant workers. The factory model of schooling was no kidding. Sit down, shut up, pencils up, face the front, and hand in the test and put your name on the top. Hopefully we're moving
Mhm,
past that
mhm.
model. Yeah.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Okay, moving right along. The next one is okay, a little bit of a longer one. As in any field or sector, there are always bad actors who will come up with an undesired ways of using something. Even if the rest of us use AI to help us with productivity, what do you think about controlling or gatekeeping the bad actors? This person added that I feel just like that the education sector, the regulatory policies can take a while to be put into place, and this field is progressing at a super speed.
Yes, yes, definitely. It's going way too fast to regulate from the educational standpoint. I just read an article. Actually, it wasn't even an article. It's a top 10 list of things that are going to happen in the Gen AI space. And I think that there's a hue and cry for regulation. It's not going to happen. And this is actually, it should concern us all. There are task forces here and there. They're kind of staffed once in a while. You get some folks to the White House, everybody nods and smiles and takes a photo. But I feel like the best thing that could happen would be, I don't know, maybe working within the UN, creating some kind of governance that would be divorced from the technology partners a little bit, not divorced, but more like independent, because it's way too easy to have OpenAI saying we're going to regulate ourselves. That's not the way we should be doing this. We need to have an overarching governing body. I'm sorry, but I just don't see it happening, and I don't have a great answer. So that's why I'm doing talks like this to help the grassroots, which is all of us to think about. When your manager says we're going to create a mental health chatbot, now you have some questions. Really? you know.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
maybe this is the way we have to focus on the grassroots, which is really unfortunate. But international governing bodies, their eyes are not on this prize right now. There's other issues going on, which are also scary.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, yes. Complicated question, but I feel like you framed that really, really well with the state
I
of
hate to be
everything
doom and
today.
gloom. I'm just like, do what we
It's
can.
fair. It's fair. Yes, yes. I mean, you have to treat the industry and the state of everything as it is.
Yes.
Okay, we've got a couple more left. We'll see if we can squeeze in here. Next one is, how do you think we can combat the rise of misinformation with AI? Should we build an should we build an AI to detect misinformation? Interesting.
There are a bunch of them that came out. I don't know so much about misinformation, but even just detecting the use of AI. So I mentioned zero
Mm,
GPT zero. There's a couple of them that came out. But if you're going to create an AI to manage AI, how is that AI going to get trained? This is why we've been relying on human workers. So maybe in the future, it will be everyone's crowdsourced responsibility to flag, ChatGPT has, helpful or not helpful. Maybe we should all take responsibility to thumbs down or whatever tools are available to us. Um, Whenever you see some weird stuff, I actually should have thumbs down the heck out of that dreadful verb conjugation because that was a hard stop for me. But there's a lot more serious stuff going on out there. There's TikTok. I'm obsessed with TikTok. I love it. Boy, there's misinformation. There's faked voices now, deep fakes, which are actually quite scary. So we have to lean into our critical thinking skills and make sure that it's not bleached out of our brains. Always be skeptical and always thumbs up, thumbs down. I think that's all we can do.
yes, I like that. I like that phrasing. Always be skeptical. It's a great way to approach using AI. Okay, with just about a minute left, yeah, you mentioned GPT zero and thought we could end there. You'd and I think you had said that during a point where you were talking about um, different ways for folks to, or for teachers specifically, to reduce the use or police the use of AI. And so I was hoping you could end on that one. What are you think you just kind of mentioned what those tools are doing, and what do you feel like is what's the right way to handle it in the classroom today?
I've got the perfect answer for you because I wrote a manifesto on community.aws about this. So if you go to community.aws and look for my article on Gen AI in the classroom, I provide a little bit of a roadmap of the way I think this should play out. I hope it'll play out. It's not going to be relying on GPT-0 or running things through Turnitin because there's a lot of false positives, which is really terrible for students. They're being disbelieved, you know. But there are different ways of approaching pedagogy, of approaching teaching, using toolboxes that have been created in the digital humanities, actually. I love the digital humanities. I wish I had known about it 10 years ago when it was like in its heyday. These are classrooms where folks are looking at texts and then using technology to analyze them, to create digital assets around them. And then it's a very collaborative way of working with people across departments. So you want to get your Python expert to help you scrape this data, create your visualizations, then you interface with a music department to turn it into a screenplay or something like that, or an audio asset. These are the kind of interdisciplinary humanities disciplines infused with technology that I think are the way forward, because all of these assets that are produced by these classrooms have to be assessed live, or a website has to be created, and you can use generative AI to help you with some of these tasks, but they're not the main brain behind it, right? It's a collaboration. So you're creating your own tiny neural network, right, from within your university, and leaning into all the interdisciplinary juiciness that is there. I think this is the way. So look at your digital humanities classrooms and see what they're creating. And I think that's a spark of hope that I think we can lean into. It's beautiful.
Yes, it's going to be, I don't know, this is going to be just fascinating to see how this evolves. I mean, I've been thinking about it mostly within the context of software development, but yeah, the education sector, really, really interesting. So thank you very much for the talk, and for, yes, all of the thoughtful little insights that I have so many more questions now, but